Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over how to successfully build new decks in the new standard shift. So, let's get into it. With the release of Innistrad Midnight Hunt, we lost a number of standard sets and a bunch of our old staples that we relied on to make decks for events. So we lost Throne of Eldraine, we lost Theros Beyond Death, we lost Ikoria, and we lost M21. We lost things like Urza, we lost things like Ruinous Ultimatum, we lost things like Song of Creation, Eidolon of Blossoms. There were just so many really good cards in those sets that we used that the standard shift has been something that I've noticed people have had a difficult time with regardless of what their collection looks like. People with more established collections tend to rely on specific cards event after event after event. And so they have a solid core that they build their decks around, and they rely on that core. And when pieces of that core rotate out of standard, then sometimes it can be difficult to make a new deck that you feel fills the same playstyle. Now, same is going to be true for newer players in terms of having their own challenges, right? Because for newer players, they aren't going to have all these cards. And so when a standard rotation happens, it can be difficult for them to make decks with what they have. So the idea behind this video is it's going to be very much like my deck building 101 video, but it's going to go over a very bare bones how to build a successful deck in the new standard. I'm going to be showcasing some of the cards that I think are chase cards and must-have cards. And so this is not a list of the only things that are good. It's just how I would go about deck building and the cards that I think are worth chasing. If there is enough interest in this video, if you guys found this really helpful and you want to see specific other videos for the other colors, meaning that you would like me to make one on how to build successfully for green, how to build successfully for red, how for blue, how for black, how for white, right? Then I can go ahead and make some of those as well. It just depends on the feedback and interest level from you all. So let's get into what it takes to make a good deck. Good decks in Puzzle Quest tend to have a few very similar components. They have some way of getting a bunch of mana. The easiest way to do that is gem conversion. They have some way of getting rid of creatures and supports. They have removal. They have some way of getting more cards. That's going to be card advantage. And they have a win condition, which is typically creatures. So I'm going to be going over gem conversion, removal, card advantage, and creatures. For the first section in gem conversion, you typically want to be running gem converters that convert to a single color, or you want to be running loyalty converters. The reason why I like gem converters that convert to a single color is that you're able to get a lot of consistency and you're able to target a single planeswalker mana bonus that is best from your planeswalker's mana bonuses. Now, we have a number of single color converters in the current standard. We have 3 gem converting cycles, or I should say groups that have remained. And then we have a bunch of loyalty converters. So the 3 gem converters to keep your eyes out for, we have the Kaldheim ones that convert 2 gems each and cost 12 mana. They all have some extra effect when they get blown up, but by and large, you're going to be using these for the convert to the color. We also have the rares from the recent Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. These are going to cost 9 mana instead of 12, and they're going to have 4 shields, which is definitely helpful. They also all are going to convert 2 to their color, and then they all have, and if there are 10 or more gems of the color, then some kind of buff happens for you. So we have a white one, a red one, a blue one, a black one, and a green one. So your ideal would be that you can put, say, one of the Kaldheim gem converters and one of the Adventure Forgotten Realms converters in your deck at the same time. Or if you are the Grand Poobah and you happen to have the final set of converters, these ones are the best. And these are from the Zendikar Rising set. These ones are the best because they all convert 3 gems to their color. However, there isn't one for green, and that's because the green one came out in the dual deck event of Zendikar versus Eldrazi. But that said, green has enough other wonderful gem converters with things like Nissa's Pilgrimage, Arixmethys, and the World Tree that it's less of a big deal for green. Now, these ones all convert 3 and have some bonus effect. The bonus effects on these tend to be pretty great. So we have Ameria, Valakut, Crypt of Agadim, and Magosi the Waterveil. But they all convert 3, so these are definitely, I think, the most chase-worthy. For that matter, if you were trying to figure out which of these gem converters would be best for you to try and pick up, I think that in general, booster crafting the rare Zendikar Rising cards to try and pick up some of these converters and the rare land forming cards is definitely going to be in your favor, as they all happen to be cards that I think are absolute essential cards in the new standard. Now, beyond those converters, there is the possibility that you don't have those, or you're playing with a planeswalker that has multiple great mana gains. And in that case, it might be better for you to run dual converters. Now, we have 2 sets of really nice dual converters in the current standard. We have the land-forming uncommons that are actually quite decent. You're going to get 2 lands if you succeed in achieving the land-forming, and they're all going to be converting 2. There are 10 total, and it's going to be all of the different color pairings, right? So they all have 3 shields for the first land, they have 2 shields for the second, but there are 10 of these guys, and they are absolutely worth picking up. They're from Kaldheim and from Zendikar Rising. So Zendikar had just so many really great cards to try and pick up, and so it's definitely a great chase set for cards. But one of the things you can do is you can run 3 of these as an example for your Planeswalker's 3 best colors, and you just include all of the color pairings. And the same will be true for the other dual color converters, and that actually is from the most recent set. Now, while you can definitely run these land forming ones and these lands that convert 2 gems, I think that in general you are going to be much better suited using the single converters. Now, it may be possible that you're running a planeswalker that has just absolutely phenomenal loyalty abilities, and we're in a somewhat of a golden age of loyalty converters because we have access to a lot of very low mana cost converters that are going to have other positive effects or will convert a bunch of gems to loyalty. So between cards like Access Tunnel, which is only 6 mana, Biblioplex, which is only 8 mana and converts 3 and has an additional effect, and Hall of Oracles, along with the Crawling Barrens, you can put 2 to 3 of these in your deck, and you will find that you will get a lot of loyalty and a lot of consistency out of that as well. I very much do not recommend that you put loyalty converters and gem color conversion in the same deck, because you might wind up converting away from the things that you're trying to get, and it will cause for a lot of inconsistencies. Yes, you will have a few matches where great things happen, but don't rely on that happening consistently. I do really like using the loyalty converters, but I also really like using the gem converters. It just depends if I'm trying to get more out of my planeswalker abilities or more out of my collection. Now, there is a new land cycle that came out with the Midnight Hunt set, and this land cycle is actually incredibly good. At the time of my taking the screenshots, I hadn't really gotten a lot of use out of this land cycle, but then I went ahead and used them, and they are all absolutely phenomenal. So they all have, when they enter the board, you're going to gain 5 mana to all cards in your hand, and then they're going to convert 2 gems. Better yet, with the upcoming set Crimson Vow that's coming out in just a few weeks in Paper Magic, that set is going to drop the other 5 of these dual lands. So right now we have 5 of them because there's just 1 for each of these allied colors. And then when Crimson Vow comes out, we're going to get all of the other colors as well. So you could choose to run a bunch of these lands here from this land cycle. I think you will find that if you have ways to cheat lands in, they'll be very good. But in general, they are quite useful. Now, for gem conversion, what is it that you want to do? This is going to be pretty simple. You want to run between 2 and 3 gem converters in your deck. That's the general rule of thumb. 2 to 3 gem converters. Make sure that they're converting the same things, or that you're running multiple dual converters that will convert to the same 3 colors, right? So if, let's say that you've got Brocon, which is 3 colors, you want to make sure that you have blue-red, blue-green, and red-green, right? So just keep that in mind for your gem conversion. 2 to 3 gem converters. Following gem conversion, you're going to want to see that you have removal in your deck. General rule of thumb for removal is that you have 2 cards in your deck that are able to get rid of creatures and 1 card in your deck that's able to get rid of supports. It is important that there is a card that gets rid of vanguards as well, and if you can have that be the card that gets rid of supports, that would be the ideal. If you are able to get if you're able to get removal that is able to fill multiple roles, then you can get away with having 2 removal cards in your deck. You might have 1 removal card that destroys creatures and supports, and then your other removal card is one that destroys creatures, and you can get away with that fairly well. Now, the other thing that I would suggest for removal is if you're able to run a board wipe, that's something that destroys everything, that will definitely be in your best interest, because there are times that Greg gets absolutely crazy cascades, gets a battlefield down that you feel like you can't control, and so by having access to that board wipe, it will make it so that you're going to more consistently win games. My favorite of the board wipe cards in the current standard that have remained are Ondu Inversion, although the downside to this one is that it doesn't have that confirm cancel prompt, and the Great Aurora. These ones are going to be wiping out everything. Other removal cards that are just more single removal to keep your eyes on are things like Binding the Old Gods, which is going to be able to get rid of creatures or non-land supports, vanguards included, along with getting you free lands, along with making your creatures kill your opponent's creatures. Hagra Mauling, which destroys creatures and gives you a land. Soul Shatter, which is going to be non-targeted removal. This is very important given that Hexproof and Ward are becoming more prevalent in the game. So this is going to destroy those, but it will also get rid of vanguards, which are pretty scary right now. Shatter Skull Smashing is another one. It's going to bypass Hexproof. It's going to deal damage directly and give you a land. And then, of course, support removal, right? So support removal is absolutely essential, because it's what is going to get rid of some of the more pesky cards that are able to lock you down more effectively. So it's always frustrating to get locked down, and one of the best ways to prevent yourself from getting locked down is to be able to destroy supports. Demolish is sort of the tried and true support removal card. It unfortunately does not get rid of vanguards, but is nonetheless phenomenal. And Fracture is another one that is pretty phenomenal right now, as they have low mana costs. And then Fracture, although it can't destroy lands, can destroy vanguards. It will also prioritize the support with the highest shield, so typically that's going to destroy the thing that you most want to get rid of, with the only exception of things like Hixis or Suppression Bonds, which are going to be rather annoying to deal with. We don't like those. Now, the other thing here is going to be some cards from the new set that you might want to keep your eyes out for. So Vanquish the Horde is a new board wipe card that is pretty good, very low cost. We've also got Fateful Absence, which is another low cost removal that can get rid of vanguards and creatures. And as much as I hate to put it here, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, because it is the singular best removal card in the current standard. Ruinous Ultimatum is gone, and in its place we now have this absolute behemoth that has this emblem that draws 3 cards upon activation, and then every time you draw a card, exiles an opposing card at random. So it gets rid of all their creatures, all their supports. Now, remember, what makes removal good is that it's something that you can cast reliably within 1 or 2 matches. Because if it's going to cost you a great many matches in order to be able to cast the removal, then you're probably not going to get a huge advantage out of using that removal. You want to try and use things that are cheaper in terms of cost. Now, remember, the last thing is you want to have 2 creature removal cards and 1 support removal card in your deck. So that means that with the gem converters, you're either going to be running 2 to 3 gem converters, and then with removal, you're either going to be running 2 to 3 removal cards. That means that with 2 to 3 and 2 to 3, we're somewhere between 4 to 6 cards in our deck. We could say that the average for that is going to be 5 cards. That's half of your deck of 10 cards. If you want to make sure that your decks don't fall flat, you will also incorporate some form of fetch and or card advantage in your deck. This is going to be things that are going to get you specific cards that you want from your deck and enable you to get them out on the battlefield, or that are just going to draw you a bunch of cards. Now, it is important for the fetch and for the card draw that they are either A, not going to cost you too much mana, or B, that they're getting you a heck of a lot of goodness. This one is going to have some more mythics on it. Some of that is because things like the Prismatic Bridge are available from Fiblethip's offerings every so often, so ideally many of you are going to have the Prismatic Bridge. The Prismatic Bridge has become an absolute essential card. It was already, I think, an essential card, but even more so now with the standard shift. So making sure that you have a way of reliably getting those creatures out every turn is going to be very, very good. You also, for your card draw, I should say, it's best if it's also able to do something else for you. I like it if the card draw is able to also give me mana in some way or provide me with some form of control. You'll see that Seagate Restoration gives us the opportunity for loyalty and creates a support that gives you blue gem conversion, which is really nice. Nissa's Revelation is an old mainstay from Origins that's going to make it so that you gain life. Day's Undoing is a card that always seems to get swept under the rug later on in a standard life cycle, but then when the standard rotates becomes viable again. This one is going to draw cards and give them mana. Deckbuilding is an absolute beast of a card. It was for some time the best Vanguard in the game. It has been replaced by Teferi. Teferi is now the best Vanguard in the game, Hero of Dominaria. I would not suggest going out and picking up Deckbuilding right now if you don't already have Dak, but I wanted to put Dak here because if you do have Dak, then Dak is 100% worth putting in your deck. The 0 ability to discard a card, draw 2 cards, and give them mana based on 2 mana for each of this support's shields is an absolutely phenomenal card to use in your deck. That said, not all of the great sort of card fetch and draw cards are going to be rares and mythics. Things like Eureka Moment are absolutely phenomenal. It's going to draw cards and convert gems, which will potentially give you mana. We've got Mentor's Guidance, which is going to draw cards, and it's going to give those cards mana. And if you have one of basically any creature subtype in the game or a Vanguard, then you're going to copy this effect and make it happen again. So this one could wind up being like 8 mana for 4 cards and give all of them 4 mana, which is huge, absolutely huge. So you get 16 mana out of 8, and you get 4 cards for 1. So definitely worth it. Nahiri's Lithoforming is going to be following the same general principle of it's going to destroy a bunch of gems, which is going to get you loyalty and mana, and is going to draw you a bunch of cards. Valakut's Awakening, same general deal. You're going to cycle through your hand. Basically, you're going to discard and redraw your hand, and then you're going to get a convert red land. Turntimber Symbiosis is going to be in here along the same lines as, say, the Prismatic Bridge, in that it's going to give you very specific targeting for your fetch, which is always really good. Realms Uncharted is even better now than it was before, which is kind of crazy to say because it was already, to me, my most used or one of my most used cards. But this is going to enable you to fetch removal between things like Ondu Inversion, Hagra Mauling, Shatterskull Smashing, and more targeted creature fetch with things like Turntimber Symbiosis. And on top of that, not only is it fetch, but the kicker is going to make it so you also convert gems. And so you'll see this relative theme of all of these cards that I really like here are cards that are going to draw or fetch and are going to give me mana or are giving me recurring fetch. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, appears on the second one of these lists. And by the way, if you don't have this and you don't want to chase it, I absolutely understand. If you haven't seen my video on the rare Vanguards, you should definitely watch that before you start trying to pick up Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. But this one, the +2 ability is just so absolutely amazing. It draws a card and gives it 10 mana every single turn. To be fair, I have once had it give me 9 mana, but otherwise it's given me 10 mana every other time. You should be running gem conversion in your deck, and with that, you will have 10 gems on the board that are in blue or white, and as such, it will give you that with 10 mana every single time. Beyond that, the -8 is going to be able to draw you 3 cards and give the emblem to make it so that now when you use your +2, you're now drawing a card and exiling something your opponent controls. This is the end-all be-all best of these draw cards. Beyond that, from the new set, another one to look out for is Sigarda's Splendor. Once again, it draws cards, it gives it mana, and it's if you are in a neutral to negative board state, which means that it's just going to help give you consistency to get more wins. Once you're already winning, it's just going to give you life. But nonetheless, it's following that same theme of draw cards and give it mana. The last one that I really like here is Teferi, Who Slows the Sunset. This one is currently bugged, so I would not recommend using it at present moment. You cannot play multiple copies of it, and it doesn't reinforce shields. But nonetheless, its +1 ability is absolutely phenomenal in that it's able to draw cards and give mana, and then the -8 is able to make it so your creatures get prevent damage and vigilance. So the general recurring theme here for the fetch and card draw is you want card draw that also is going to do something else for you, preferably card draw that is in some way going to give you mana. Now, as we have 2 to 3 gem converters in our deck, we have 2 to 3 removal cards in our deck. That means that, let's say that we're at 5 cards. Let's pretend for a moment that we're able to make this really, really nice and sweet. And so we're able to have 3 gem converters and 2 removal cards. That is, I think, the sweet spot ideal, meaning you have all 3 of the land cycles and you have 2 removal cards, one of which is able to get rid of supports. Then that leaves you room for 2 of these card draw / fetch cards. If you only have room for 1, or alternatively, let's say that you only have 2 of the converters, and so you're running 3 removals, so you still have room for 2, that's fine. But if you only have room for 1, make sure that's one that's going to count for you. My general suggestion is the Prismatic Bridge. Finally, for your win condition, it's probably going to be creatures, because the win condition for most Puzzle Quest decks are indeed creatures. And the general rule of thumb is you want to be running 3 creatures in your deck, 3 different creatures. You don't want to run more than 3 creatures in your deck, especially now that Mutate has left Standard. So this is just going to be a list of the best creatures in the game that are in Standard. These are things that I would recommend targeting. I know that they're all going to be mythics and masterpieces. We lost our really good rares like Quartzwood Crasher, Garuda, Eidolon of Blossoms, Leafkin Avenger, and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, the benefit now is that most of these are available from Fiblethip's offering, so you can pick them up for 400 mana crystals. Tiamat is an absolute beast. She is one of the best cards in the game. If Tainted Adversary didn't exist, I would argue that she could be the number 1 or 2 best otherwise. The Dragon is phenomenal, especially in conjunction with Tiamat. If you're able to pick up the Dragon and use it in conjunction with Tiamat, I don't think that you will regret using those resources. Old Gnawbone is an absolute must-have for every player in the game. If you don't have Old Gnawbone, make sure that you have 400 mana crystals saved up, and you pick it up from Fiblethip's offering. It is absolutely game-breaking. It didn't need a buff, and then it got one. Kind of confusing. Tanazir Quandrix is part of one of the nastiest 2-card duo cores that you might run into in the current Standard. This is more here just as a watch out, because Tanazir exists and makes all of your other creatures have a base power toughness of 7/7, as does Phylath World Sculptor, which is going to make all the forest tokens in the world, and between the 2 of them, they will absolutely one-shot you, especially if your opponent is running Brokon and uses the 3rd ability and fetches both of these, or even Nissa Worldwaker, or heck, even now Ren and 7, which is able to produce absolutely astronomical amounts of mana. You're going to find that these 2 are going to be able to do some serious spanking. Ancient Greedwarden has maintained its place as being very relevant, especially with all of the ways that are still in green to mill cards or get lands into the graveyard. And it also is able to protect you with vigilance and gives you gem conversion. Velomachus remains incredibly powerful. It's a little bit weaker now that Ruinous Ultimatum is no longer an optimal fetch for it, but nonetheless, it's still able to fetch your other removal, and that makes it an ideal card to use in every event that you can put this thing into your decks. Angel of Destiny is here just because it's entirely terrifying and scary. You do not want to go up against this thing, but for that matter, in an event, you probably don't want to use this thing either because it's going to kill your opponent so darn fast. That said, it's an incredibly powerful card. There's no list of powerful cards in the game that is complete without Tainted Adversary. This card is just game-breaking. I honestly am having difficulty wrapping my head around just how good this adversary is. And for that matter, all of the adversaries from the new set are all pretty great. They're pretty excellent. Those are definitely the cards that I would target pulling from the new set, apart from the Vanguards. But for your creatures, ideally what you want is you either want A, some form of overwhelming power, or B, you want to have some kind of effect that the creature has that is going to do more than just be a creature. So Tainted Adversary is a perfect example of something with just overwhelming power. It just takes one of these to win the game, and then that's it. Whereas Velomachus is an excellent example of something that is able to do more than just be a creature. It is a big creature, but it also has vigilance to protect you, and it's going to fetch you removal every single turn. You've got things like Old Gnawbone. Yes, it's a creature. Yes, it's beefy, but then it also makes it so you get an incredible amount of gold tokens, and those are going to give you mana. So any creature that's able to serve as a dual-purpose creature is absolutely going to be worth using. If you would like to see more creatures, then by all means let me know that you want to see the single color versions of this video, and in those videos I will be going much more in depth for all rarities of the cards that I think are worth using and building around for those colors. So in conclusion, you want to try and make sure that you have a healthy balance between gem conversion, removal, card draw, and creatures in your deck. The ideal sweet spot is 2 to 3 gem converters, 2 to 3 removal cards, roughly 2 of those fetch cards, and then finally 3 creatures. So if you follow that rule of thumb, you'll find that you'll have very successful decks. I hope this video has been informative and helpful for you all, especially if you've been struggling to grasp the new standard. I recognize that not all of these are cards that you are all going to have. However, I'm putting them in the list like this because I'm trying to give you guys an idea of also some things that are worth chasing after. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.